One of these trains hit over 160 miles an hour and still got scrapped. Another was so powerful that Britain, unable to use it, sold it to the Soviet Union. One tilted into curves like a superbike. Then the whole world stole the idea. British engineers didn't just build locomotives. They built the future, handed it to everyone else, and then watched it leave the country. These are 10 machines that were simply born too soon. Number 1. The Bulleid Merchant Navy. Let's start in the middle of the Second World War, at Eastleigh Works in 1941, where a man named Oliver Bulleid rolled out something that barely looked like a steam locomotive at all. It was wrapped in a flat rectangular casing. Bulleid refused to call it streamlined, insisting it was air-smoothed, designed to be cleaned quickly rather than to cut through the air. But the radical stuff was hidden underneath. While almost every other British express engine was still built from riveted plates and castings, the Merchant Navy used a welded all-steel boiler, one of the first at express scale in Britain, chosen partly because welding saved precious wartime materials. It ran at 280 pounds per square inch, the highest boiler pressure of any British express class. Inside the firebox sat thermic siphons, borrowed from American practice, to boost heat transfer. And then there was the valve gear. Instead of the exposed rods every steam driver knew, Bulleid buried 3 sets of valve gear inside a sealed 40-gallon oil bath, driven by a triple roller chain, an idea lifted straight from the world of the internal combustion engine. On paper, it promised continuous, low-friction, low-maintenance running. The first engine, number 21C1 Channel Packet, was the first British Pacific to enter service since 1937. Here's the catch. The future is hard to get right the first time. The chains stretched. The oil bath leaked, sometimes onto hot lagging, causing fires. The welded fireboxes cracked. Availability slumped. Between 1956 and 1959, British Railways rebuilt all 30 merchant navies, ripping out the chain gear and the casing, and reliability shot up dramatically. But make no mistake, welded boilers, enclosed running gear, ideas drawn from cars and aircraft. This was a 1941 steam engine reaching for concepts that wouldn't become normal for a generation. It was too clever for its own materials. Number 2. LMS 10,000 and 10,001. If the Merchant Navy was steam trying to escape its own past, our next entry was the future kicking the door in. In December 1947, on the London, Midland and Scottish Railway, Chief Mechanical Engineer Henry Ivatt unveiled number 10,000, Britain's first mainline diesel locomotive. The timing was deliberate to the point of cheeky. Nationalization was just weeks away, on the 1st of January 1948, and Ivatt wanted 10,000 out of the works wearing LMS letters, so history would remember it as an LMS machine. When British Railways later ordered him to remove those letters, he quietly filed the correspondence and left them on. Sister engine 10,001 followed in 1948, by which time the LMS no longer existed. Under the bodywork sat an English electric 16 SVT engine producing 1,600 horsepower, driving electric generators and traction motors, the diesel-electric formula. The design brief, set in March 1947, asked for 2 1,600 horsepower locomotives capable of 100 miles an hour and able to work top expresses like the Royal Scot, and they delivered. Running singly or coupled together as a 3,200 horsepower pair, they hauled the Euston-Glasgow expresses over the brutal climb of Shap Fell, doing the work of the biggest steam engines without a fireman shoveling coal. They were prototypes, and they were treated as such, even shipped down to the southern region in the 1950s to be compared against a rival trio of diesels. But their real legacy is enormous. That English electric engine and its descendants went on to power huge swaths of Britain's first diesel generation, the machines that became classes 20, 37, 40 and 50. The bogie design set patterns copied for decades. And the reward for the pioneers? Number 10,000 was withdrawn in 1963, 10,001 in 1966, and both were quietly scrapped by 1968. Not one was saved. The 2 locomotives that started the diesel revolution in Britain, the ancestors of nearly everything that followed, went to the cutter's torch. Enthusiasts are only now trying to build a working replica of 10,000 from scratch. Number 3. The Bulleid Leader. Oliver Bulleid wasn't finished. If the Merchant Navy was ambitious, the Leader of 1949 was almost science fiction, the most extreme rethink of the steam locomotive Britain ever attempted. Bulleid looked at the steam engine and saw everything wrong with it. The exposed footplate open to the weather, the awful working conditions, the need to turn the thing around at the end of a journey. So he designed a steam locomotive that behaved like an electric one. The Leader had a full-length enclosed body shell. You genuinely could run it through a carriage washing plant. It had a driving cab at each end, so it never needed turning. It rode on two six-wheeled power bogies, like a diesel or electric. And instead of connecting rods, the wheels on each bogie were coupled by chains in an oil bath, controlled by exotic sleeve valves rather than conventional ones. From the outside, in 1949, it looked more like a modern diesel than a steam engine. Nothing this revolutionary in British steam had been seen in over 5 were ordered. Only one was ever completed. And in 1951, with costs spiraling and the writing on the wall for steam anyway, British Railways cancelled the whole project and scrapped everything. The Leader remains one of the most fascinating what-ifs in railway history. A steam engine trying desperately to become the future. At the exact moment the future decided it didn't want steam at all. Number 4. The gas turbines 18,000 and 18,100. While Bulleid wrestled with steam, the old Great Western Railway placed a bet on something even more exotic, the gas turbine. The same principle powering the new jet aircraft, harnessed to pull expresses out of Paddington. The GWR ordered 2 prototypes back in the 1940s. The first British one, from Metropolitan Vickers, was delayed by the war, so a second was ordered from Brown Boveri in Switzerland. And that Swiss machine, number 18,000, actually arrived first, in 1949. By then the GWR was gone, and it entered service with British Railways. It produced 2,500 horsepower, could do 90 miles an hour, and the crews nicknamed it the Kerosene Castle. The whole point of a gas turbine was that a single unit could match the most powerful steam engines, at a time when you'd have needed 2 early diesels to do the same job. The British-built rival 18,100 from Metropolitan Vickers followed in 1951, rated at around 3,000 horsepower and riding on 6 driven axles. Both spent their working lives hauling express services from Paddington. The idea was genuinely visionary. Decades later, gas turbine trains would run successfully in the United States and France, but British Railways learned the hard way why they're difficult. A gas turbine is wonderfully efficient at full power and horribly thirsty when idling or running light, which is most of what a locomotive actually does, waiting at stations and pottering between duties. Fuel bills were punishing, 18,100 especially, because it drank expensive aviation kerosene. Neither was a lasting success. But look at what happened to 18,100. It was so far from ordinary that when the turbine experiment ended, British Railways didn't scrap it. They rebuilt it into a prototype electric locomotive for the coming West Coast electrification. And 18,000, the Kerosene Castle, actually survived and is preserved today at Didcot. Britain flew a jet-powered idea down its main lines 15 years before most of the world even tried. Number 5. The English electric Deltic. In 1955, English Electric wheeled out a prototype so confident it was painted in powder blue and cream with a giant headlight, dressed up to sell itself to North America. It was simply called Deltic, and it was, for a time, the most powerful single-unit diesel locomotive in the world. The magic was the engine. During the war, the Admiralty needed a diesel light and powerful enough for fast naval patrol boats. Napier answered with the Deltic, an engine so strange it's genuinely hard to picture. 18 cylinders arranged in a triangle with 3 crankshafts, one at each corner. There were no cylinder heads and no valves at all. Pairs of opposed pistons met in the middle of each cylinder. It was named after the triangular Greek letter delta. Each of these engines made 1,650 horsepower from a package weighing under 5 tons, roughly half the weight to power of the conventional diesels of the day. English Electric's gamble was audacious, put 2 of them in one locomotive. That gave 3,300 horsepower on 6 axles, and a power-to-weight ratio 150% better than anything the company had built before. The prototype ran hundreds of thousands of miles proving the concept, and British Railways were convinced. 22 production machines, the Class 55, were delivered in 1961 and 62 to conquer the East Coast Main Line from King's Cross to Edinburgh. They offered Britain its first regular 100-mile-an-hour expresses and took over from the legendary steam Pacifics. The Deltics ruled the East Coast for the best part of 2 decades, until the HSTs displaced them and the whole fleet was withdrawn between 1980 and 1982. But the concept, extreme power density, borrowed from naval engineering wrapped in styling aimed at a global export market that never quite materialized, was pure future thinking for the mid-1950s. And unlike our earlier pioneers, this story has a happy ending. 6 of the production Deltics survive, and some still run on the main line today. The original prototype sits in the National Railway Museum. Number 6. The Blue Pullman. Now for one that looked like nothing else on Britain's railways and quietly invented the shape of the modern high-speed train. In 1960, British Railways introduced the Blue Pullman, officially Class 251, built by Metro Camel. In a country still running smoky, rattling carriages, these were spaceships. They were finished in a striking Nanking blue and white livery. And crucially, they were the first fully air-conditioned trains in Britain, controlled temperature and humidity throughout, at a time when air conditioning on a train was almost unheard of here. The luxury didn't stop there. Double-glazed windows kept out the noise. First-class passengers sank into deeply padded reclining armchair seats. There was diffused fluorescent lighting, proper table service, specially designed menus and wine lists, silverware and glassware bearing the Pullman crest. It was designed to fight back against the motor car and the growing threat of domestic air travel by offering something genuinely better. But the deeper significance is in the layout. The Blue Pullman was a diesel-electric multiple unit, a fixed formation with a streamlined power car at each end and passenger cars between them, all designed and operated as one integrated set. If that arrangement sounds familiar, it should. It's exactly the layout British Railways would later perfect in the Intercity 125. The Blue Pullmans weren't a runaway success in their own right. There were only 5 sets. They suffered from a rough ride at first, and their small, non-standard fleet made them awkward and expensive to run. They were withdrawn in 1973 after just 13 years, and, following a now familiar pattern, not a single one was preserved. They were scrapped completely. But the ideas survived. Air-conditioned comfort, fixed high-speed formations, a power car at each end. The Blue Pullman quietly demonstrated all of it more than a decade before the train that would make those ideas world-famous. Number 7. The Brush Kestrel HS 4000. In 1967, at Brush Traction in Loughborough, a private company built a locomotive that British Railways didn't ask for and in the end couldn't use. It was called Kestrel, and its number told you everything. HS 4000. HS for Hawker Siddeley, Brush's parent company. 4000 for 4,000 horsepower. That figure was the headline. Kestrel was powered by a single Sulzer 16-cylinder engine, and that word single is the whole point. The powerful diesels of the era used 2 crankshafts in parallel to reach around 2,500 horsepower. Kestrel's Sulzer engine used one common crankshaft in a compact V-form, making it lighter and more efficient, and it delivered 4,000 horsepower from a single prime mover. That made Kestrel the most powerful single-engine diesel locomotive to run in service anywhere in Britain, a record it still holds. It could reach 110 miles an hour, and it married a modern AC alternator to its traction system through advanced silicon rectifiers, technology that pointed straight at the future. Hawker Siddeley formally handed it over to British Railways at Marylebone in January 1968, and it was put to work proving itself, hauling enormous coal trains of over 2,000 tons and running fast expresses between King's Cross and Newcastle on turns normally reserved for the Deltics. So why isn't Kestrel a legend on every British line today? One insurmountable problem: weight. All that power sat on bogies that pressed too hard on the track. Its axle loading was simply too heavy for much of the network, a concern sharpened after a fatal derailment caused by a broken rail. British Railways placed no orders. And so, in 1971, Kestrel was sold, not scrapped, sold, to the Soviet Union for £127,000, shipped out from Cardiff docks and regauged to run on Russian tracks. Soviet engineers studied it closely. Elements of its bogies and controls influenced their later TEP-70 locomotives. Britain built the most powerful diesel it had ever seen, decided it couldn't use it, and handed the technology to a Cold War rival. Kestrel was finally scrapped in Russia around 1993. Number 8. The Intercity 125 HST. Here's the strangest thing about the most successful train Britain ever built. It was only ever meant to be a stopgap. In the early 1970s, British Railways had grand plans for a futuristic high-speed train, but it was running late and looked risky. So engineers, led by Terry Miller, proposed a safer bet: Take proven conventional technology and simply do it brilliantly. A rake of new Mark III coaches sandwiched between two streamlined diesel power cars, one at each end. It was designed as an interim measure, something to run until the fancy project was ready. That interim train was the high-speed train, the Intercity 125. It entered service in 1976 and it was a revolution. Before the HST, British trains were limited to 100 miles an hour. The 125 was named for its 125-mile-an-hour cruising speed and it slashed journey times across the country. It gave Britain its first sub-3-hour London to Edinburgh service and reshaped intercity travel almost overnight. And it was fast, genuinely record-breakingly fast. On the 1st of November 1987, on the East Coast Main Line near Northallerton, on a test run for new carriage bogies, HST power cars 43,102 and 43,159 hit 148 miles an hour. That is the world speed record for a diesel train, and it still stands today. Nothing diesel-powered has ever gone faster. But the real proof of how far ahead of its time it was lies in its longevity. Built between 1975 and 1982, the HST didn't just survive, it thrived. Many were re-engined with modern German MTU engines from 2005 to give them a new lease of life, and after more than 4 decades, HST sets were still hauling frontline passengers and inspecting the nation's track well into the 2020s. A train designed as a temporary fix outlived nearly everything meant to replace it, and held a world record for its entire working life. That is what ahead of its time actually looks like. Number 9. The Advanced Passenger Train, APT. Remember that ambitious future project the HST was only supposed to fill in for? This is it, and it's the most heartbreaking story on this list. British Railways had a problem. The West Coast Main Line was full of curves, and you can't take a curve at high speed without flinging passengers sideways. The rest of the world's answer was to build expensive new dead-straight railways. Britain's answer was far cleverer. Build a train that leans into the bends like a motorcyclist. That was the Advanced Passenger Train, and its active tilting system was pioneering. The experimental version, APTE, was gas turbine powered and started running in 1972. On the 10th of August 1975, it hit 152.3 miles an hour, a new British railway record. Then came the electric service prototype, APTP. On the 20th of December 1979, it tore up the record books, reaching 162.2 miles an hour. That record stood for 23 years. It wasn't beaten in Britain until a Eurostar in 2003. This was a genuinely world-beating machine, packed with advanced hydrokinetic brakes and cutting-edge engineering. And then it all went wrong in the most public way imaginable. The project had dragged on for over a decade, plagued by underfunding and impossible deadlines. When British Railways, desperate to show progress, put the prototypes into passenger service in December 1981 with journalists aboard, the trains suffered embarrassing failures in front of the press. The tilting technology was blamed, the headlines were brutal, and the political will simply evaporated. The APT was quietly pulled from service and, by 1987, broken up. Here's the gut punch. The technology was never the real problem, and Britain proved it by watching everyone else succeed with the same idea. Active tilting, the concept the APT pioneered, went on to be adopted on high-speed trains around the world, including Italy's Pendolino family. When modern tilting trains later ran on that very same West Coast Main Line, they were using the concept Britain had invented, abandoned, and let slip away decades earlier. Number 10. The Class 91 Electra. We end in 1988 with a machine that carried the DNA of that abandoned dream and hit a wall of a very different kind. When British Railways electrified the East Coast Main Line in the 1980s, it needed a new flagship, a fast, powerful electric locomotive to head the Intercity 225 sets. GEC won the contract, and from 1988 the Class 91, nicknamed Electra, was built at Crewe, 31 of them, and at 6,300 horsepower they were the most powerful locomotives in Britain. The engineering was quietly brilliant, and much of it came straight out of the APT research program, the failed dream feeding directly into a working machine. To run safely at very high speed, the Class 91 mounted its traction motors inside the body, driving the bogies through cardan shafts. That reduced the unsprung mass hammering the track at speed, cutting wear dramatically. The name Intercity 225 pointed at the goal. 225 kilometers an hour or 140 miles an hour. And it could absolutely do it. On the 17th of September 1989, near Little Bytham, on the very stretch of line where the steam locomotive Mallard set its world record in 1938, a Class 91 reached 161.7 miles an hour. That remains the fastest a locomotive has ever gone in Britain. So here's the frustration. The Class 91 was designed from the ground up for 140-mile-an-hour service, but it has almost never been allowed to run at that speed carrying passengers. The reason isn't the train, it's the infrastructure around it. Britain's line-side signals are spaced for slower trains. At 140 miles an hour, a driver can't reliably see and react to them in time. Running that fast for real would have needed in-cab signaling that was never installed on the route. So the Class 91, capable of 140, has spent its entire career pegged back to 125, the same speed as the diesel HSTs it was meant to leave behind. A locomotive built for the future, held permanently at the speed of the past. If there's one story that sums up this entire list, it's that one. So that's it for today. If you like this video, then please hit the like and subscribe button for more videos. Thanks for watching.